about solving them. We know what an equation is. They're equal on both sides. Now we are going to think about how we solve for a variable. Who can tell me what the variable is in an algebraic expression or equation? Lydia.
It's usually usually a letter or a signal.
Okay, good. A letter or a signal, good. The first thing we need to do is isolate the variable. Jake?
What does isolate mean?
Excellent question. That's where we're going next. Nope, wrong thing. Sorry. Isolate. To set apart from others. Alone. When a student, unfortunately, maybe will get isolated, they get put by themselves somewhere, correct? So isolate is to set apart from others or alone. So that ice skater is alone. The kids are playing, they're doing hopscotch. Unfortunately, the ice skater is isolated now, and she's all by herself over there. Okay? Yes, Bailey.
I was playing this game and it said there was an isolated island.
Oh, did it make sense to you what it meant?
No, I didn't know what it meant.
Does it make sense to you now? See? Good, I'm glad.
Isolated.
See, no one in this room is isolated because we're all working in groups. Right? So I'm isolated because I'm by myself over here. Right? But you're not. Okay, now on your whiteboards, I have a job for you. Describe or show me a picture on your word that on the whiteboard that the word isolate means to you. You have a minute. 40 seconds. Good. I like it, Raimundo. Good. $25 seconds. Is that what I showed you? So what should it be? 10 seconds. Nice. Good. An equation is like a balance scale. And I'm going to show you a picture of that in just a second. What you do to one side of the scale, you have to do to the other side. We don't want the equation to tip over one way or the other way. We have to make it equal. That's where the equal sign comes in, like the balance scale. There's a old school picture of a balance scale. You might see something like that, I know probably in science class, but maybe even in an old grocery store. They used to have, I know the one-sided one where you weigh your items, but this one has to have two sides because our equation is two sides. So what you do to one side, you have to do to the other. I'm going to ask you a question now, and we're going to say it out loud, okay? I'm going to give you an example first. If I add 7 to one side, what I'm going to do to the other side is to add 7. We do to one side, you have to do to the other side. Okay, so I'm going to ask you. I multiply by 2. What do I do to the other side? Good. If I divide by 4 on one side, what do I do to the other side? You flipped it around. Okay, let's try another one. If I subtract 7 on one side, what am I going to subtract? Good. That's very important because when we solve these equations, we have to do what we do to one side, you have to do to the other side. And showing this step is going to be very, very important when we get to a two-step equation in a couple days. Because you need to follow all these steps as we move on. Okay, steps to solve for a variable in an equation. Every equation we're going to deal with today has a variable in it, which we identified as a letter. So there are steps we need to follow. First thing we need to do is identify the variable. So whatever it is. And you know that I don't care the letter. Q. Can't use an O because it looks like a 0. Whatever the letter is, we need to identify it. We need to identify the relationship between the variable and the number. What do I mean by that? I need to know, is it being added? Is it being subtracted? Is it being multiplied? Is it being divided? That's the relationship I'm talking about. So after we identify the relationship between the variable and the number, the next thing we're going to do is ask yourself, what is the opposite of that relationship? When I talk about the opposite of that relationship, I'm saying if it's adding, we do the opposite of subtract. So I'm going to ask you now. If I say multiply, what is the opposite of multiply? Divide. How about divide? Multiply. Subtract? Add. Subtract. Good. And then we're going to perform that operation that we just decided was the opposite, that operation to both sides of the equation to get that variable isolated by itself. So if we were going to add to both sides, then we will have isolated that variable. But today we're not going to be adding. Next one. Oh, you're not going to like me. You have to write something. I want you to talk with your neighbor next to you, and I want you to come up with the steps that you need to do to solve the equation. Write it on your whiteboard. Good, Lydia. You don't have to write down the problem. I want it in words. The first thing that you're going to do. How do you know that? That's not the first thing we do. That comes later. Good. Okay. You're doing it. That's fine, but I need to know what you do first. What's the first thing you do? Okay, what's next?
We have to find the opposite. Then the third one is relationship.
How do you know that, number 2? How do you know that? You're thinking ahead. You're right, but I want to know why.
Because like when you write the problem out, then you have to like see if it was 4 and
No.
then it was 32.
The
then I
relationship
do
it
4
has
and
between
32. Then I
the
do 4, and then I hit B.
So how did you know to divide, though?
I just knew.
Yeah.
But what is that telling me? What is that showing?
It's showing
What does 4m mean?
multiplication.
There you go. So that's why you need to just add that to your next step as 3.